In this episode, Dan Bell and Kyra are going to flash some moonboard projects, and I will do my best.
Whoops. Oh no!
Of course, we're going to go over exactly why these climbers failed, some tips and tricks to what they can do to improve on their projects and improve overall as climbers, as well as some rehab and training tips. Okay, first climb is Wuthering Heights, which is V4.
Classic benchmark.
Yeah. Big foot cut there right off the bat.
I think that moves the crux on this one for me.
Going off the gas dome.
Are you guys match okay or match off?
Well, you know, some climbs...
Some say match off, right?
Well, not on the moonboard, but, you know, it's a dignity thing. But some climbs are set with a match in mind, so, you know, sometimes it's understandable. Something I've noticed a lot of climbers struggle with at all levels is actually using a high foot, and this especially comes up on the moonboard if you're shorter all the time, because a lot of the moves on the moonboard are really big. And a trick that I've noticed really helps is people tend to try and do everything at once, as in pull with their arms and their foot at the same time. And so you end up just kind of coming out from the wall instead of actually just going up. I found that instead, if you try to pull first with your arms, and then as you get to a good position, maybe around, you know, here, then you start to push with the foot, you end up getting a much better trajectory upward. So you pull on the hands until you get to a spot where you can comfortably push with the foot to then finish that motion upward. And that should get you the distance to actually grab the finish hold. So it's not that you don't want to use the foot before you start going. Like, I'm definitely pulling in on the foot, but I'm not quite pushing up, because otherwise that pushes me straight out. So instead I like pull up with the arms, like I was saying, and then stand up on the foot, which gets your trajectory upward. Ideally, that's how you do even bigger moves too.
Ew. Another really useful tool is kind of the idea of tilting. People have a habit of staying really vertical and upright, and so they're always kind of just shifting with their shoulders and their lower body. But so often you want to take good advantage of a hand as well as the foot. And this is a perfect example on this move where he kind of meets in the middle here. So he's essentially vertical through the body and therefore somewhat compromised through both the shoulder and the leg. And so what you'd really like here instead is if you could kind of rock over, moving your hips so that you're more pinned in on the shoulder while you rock across the knee more. It's gonna make it more stable in the shoulder, it's gonna be a stronger position, and it's gonna be sort of overall just easier and more reliable. The final thing, and this is gonna come up in a lot of these videos, is people don't necessarily do a very good job of taking advantage of their off leg. A very brief but very useful trick when you're reviewing your own footage is when you go to move an arm or a leg or whatever, you have a moving point here. The remaining 2 points are sort of your axis, and your body is trying to kind of fall away around this. So you very much want your off foot, assuming you want to be stable and not rotate, to be loosely in a perpendicular line relative to that. So his right foot should be somewhere around here. When I'm up in this position, first, if I don't bring my foot over, everything's kind of off and like, this is super jerky. But the second thing is, if I do bring my foot over, but I stay relatively like shared, it's kind of disengaged and wide. However, if I think about trying to suck into the shoulder and get over the foot, it's very easy. Additionally, people tend to be like too balanced between hands as they come in, and it's kind of snatchy. But if you kind of sag underneath and shift onto your control hand, you can come in with very little noise.
This is alligator.
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 Yeah.
All right, so far so good.
Hard falling.
Going for the open hand. And
I guess there's 2 points here. One is this idea on the moonboard of you want to go fast but land soft, and especially on these really in-cut holds like this white hold. When you grab it, you really want to land softly on it so that you don't just like end up in a drag 3. I personally am a big fan of using all 4 fingers. I have a memory from when I was like 11 years old at the climbing gym. Couldn't do this move, like over and over again, and I was dragging on it. And then I finally put my pinky on and did it first try, and I literally never went back. And in some ways, regret it a little bit because it would be nice to be able to use 3 fingers, but I now never do. So I was like, oh my God, 4 fingers is stronger than 3 fingers, and then just never went back. So yeah, use your pinkies.
Whoa.
That's an appropriate time to use 3 fingers.
There you go. Don't you have crimp that.
My hand is just dumb. I find that at least with 3, I have a really hard time to then like bend my arm while staying engaged on the hold. When I bend my arm, it tends to take me straight off of it because especially I'm not very practiced with 3. Whereas with 4, you can bend and actually pull in and out as well as up and down.
The open 3 especially,
keeping it open, yeah.
just gives you so little control in and out on the wall, like virtually none.
To be fair, if you don't have the strength, you don't feel comfortable in that position, that could just be what shut him down, because really he didn't try and pull through, he didn't generate, so something in his brain was like, I shouldn't do this. Technique and skill acquisition with climbing is always going to be a huge component of it, but if you don't have the required strength to pull a move, you may simply get shut down.
One of the questions we get asked a lot is, do I need to train on a hangboard if I'm already climbing on a moonboard or a kilter board? Of course, that depends on your personal background and climbing goals, but this footage we're critiquing provides a good example of how a hangboard could be useful. By the way, this video is sponsored by Fictitious, and you can get 20% off any hangboard when you purchase a doorway mount at the same time. A lot of climbers actually don't pay attention to the grip style they use on the wall, and they might not even notice when they're using a grip that doesn't suit the hold. So my first recommendation is to pay more attention to the grip type you use, as this can help you have more control on the wall and sometimes even avoid injuries. If you have a hangboard, then you have a controlled environment to do that. I was able to safely improve my finger strength in those positions, and still am, to supplement my board climbing. Ultimately, I built up a better base of finger strength in a crimp position, which allowed me to use that grip more effectively and safely on the moonboard. If you're new to board climbing and or fingerboarding, just be sure you don't add in a ton of high intensity hangs all at once. Even gentler hangs can be useful in getting you better acquainted with different grip types. And of course, if you don't have time to do your fingerboarding at the gym, or you don't want to screw a hangboard into your wall, this doorway mount from Fictitious is the perfect solution. You can even buy it with the hangboard pre-installed. Now, Dan's going to go into a bit more detail about why being able to dig behind edges with a crimp grip is so important.
So on steeper angles like moonboards or roofs or really anything steep, it's essential to keep your body pulled into the wall, whether it's by hands or feet or ideally both. But anytime you're in a sort of open 3 position or even kind of like a typical half crimp, you're not able to pull in on the hold very much. You're not able to dig behind it and get that kind of like traction that you would like. And so, especially on the moonboard, when you're given a hold that has an in-cut like that, it is so useful to make sure to take the time to line your fingers up with the actual in-cut of the edge so you get as much force into the wall as possible. If you've been slopering a lot, you can kind of like generate with the foot and kind of try to pull straight down, but it's still not nice feeling. I mean, aside from the mechanics of it, it's just really sharp. So you have to take the daggery bit rather than. But if you like really load up on the foot, you can kind of make it work. You just have to stay really low. But it's gross. That said, if holds are good enough, or for rope climbing and things sometimes, it may be sometimes better to have sort of a less engaged grip to be really efficient. But for the most part, especially on boards and short, hard boulders, you really want to get behind them or things are going to be like very, very inhibited. What the hell is this?
A second sword hold.
Why didn't I think of that? Five fingers. He's got the thumb on the
4 and a thumb.
No.
I would also say I think the reason why he falls on this move is because of the move before, actually. This violent come in that he does.
Yeah.
It's just a bit too fast and then taxes the entire system going into the next move. And so if you can get under a hold and kind of change this axis to be more like this instead of like this, I think that would really help get your body over so that you don't have this same violent come in. It creates less of a violent action. fraction of
Less
like,
violence.
yeah, like
More
side to side.
gentle.
Yeah, more gentle.
They kind of like rocket into this thing. So probably the biggest single factor is just shifting onto the control hand and away from the hand that's going to be moving. But then you can kind of play with the pace of the move by where you put your off foot to kind of control it. So another example of kind of like the importance of what you're doing with the non-primary foot.
Okay,
We're
Magnum
recording, yeah?
V6. Yes. Out. He just had a knee for lunch, that's for sure.
This is a lot of moves for a moonboard climb.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I don't want to bump this many times. Great. I mean, to be fair, in a conventional sense, good tension.
Yeah. Didn't move a ton.
Yeah, kind of same there. It's like it's not quite right, but he controls it well.
So close. That last hold is bad compared to the other holds.
He switches his feet like a bunch of times, whereas you
kinda
could,
dancing back and forth,
yeah,
which
just
costs
keep,
the cuts if you're not careful.
yep. Which, I mean, maybe that is costing him some energy, especially on the longer problem that is this problem, which maybe that's why he gasses out at the end. I'm gonna try and repeat this almost exactly how he did it. I'm gonna use a little bit more efficient feet in the middle section.
Nice.
Come on.
I'm gonna use a little bit more efficient feet. He switches his feet like a bunch of times. Maybe that is costing him some energy. A little bit more efficient feet, bunch of times. Maybe that's why he gasses out at the end. Oh no! Almost exactly how he did it. He gasses out at the end. More efficient feet, gasses out. It's just his feet. Left hand foot match I love, but that one just feels harder for me.
I like that. So something that I noticed a couple times on this video that seemed to happen fairly often is people will initiate a pull-up or a lock-off or whatever with the bicep first rather than setting the shoulder and kind of controlling the motion. So it happens at a pretty similar time. You don't want to like lock all the way down and then try to pull things, feel stuck and bad and kind of pinchy and stuff. But you want it to be kind of in one motion where it's like it initiates with the shoulder set, and then right as it kind of starts to set and scoop, you start pulling through nice and fluid. But what happens instead, in a lot of cases, as we can kind of see here, as well as in the lower one, is people will at least like kind of hiccup and they start with the bicep pull, which will immediately cause a shoulder rise and then kind of drop down. So not only does that kind of get you out of sequence, so it's hard to get that power back that you would have gotten from the initial kind of snap and set, but it also tends to drive your shoulder up, which drives you away from your hand. And so you typically get a little turned away like this. So see, he catches it, he pulls in, and the shoulder kind of drives up here. And now it's kind of behind him in this funny position where it's really quite difficult to transfer force between the hand and the foot that he's trying to put back on. And so it just becomes very difficult to control. So he's got this like big old like bent in half kind of angle, trying to get the force down and over rather than being kind of like set through a little bit more and driven across the knee a little bit more, which would give him like a much straighter line between these two. It's not a big deal short term, but it's something that's useful to keep an eye on and try to fix over time.
I think one of the issues I see with this sometimes is like people actually have gotten it somewhere along the line that doing like full range pull-ups are a bad thing. Being able to sag down at the bottom is for some reason a negative, so people will stop and then they reinitiate through their elbows. So it's almost like their training that they're doing off the wall is reinforcing a negative habit because they heard somewhere at some point that it's bad to like sag down into your shoulders.
I feel like I've heard almost that like people think that you're disengaged at the bottom and they want to, and people try and stay engaged. And I think climbers especially tend to like be really comfortable in this to this. And so they're like, okay, I'm here, I'm engaged, I'm strong, and this is weak and not engaged, but it is actually just full range of motion.
Yeah. So oftentimes climbers will stop here because this is still like engaged in my shoulders versus you can see how much further I just transferred to get through my full range. This is keeping the shoulders engaged. So here's just a always engaged pull-up motion versus a full range where I'm going all the way down. Now, I wouldn't actually break that up. I would have it be one continuous motion from the very bottom to the very top. I think it's even okay to settle at the bottom for a moment if need be to feel comfortable in that position. When you're pulling out of it, try and engage your arms and your back at the same time. You don't need to break it up. You don't need to go, huh, huh, but rather make it one continuous motion. You know what? The reality is sometimes you will hit a move and you will be quite reached or stretched out and you will be quite disengaged. And if you have no exposure to that with any of your off-the-wall training, you're actually not training the muscles at their full lengthened position. So it can actually make things a little bit worse for you. I'm not saying that's going to guarantee an injury or anything, but if you have that training, being able to control that motion while you're at that full range, it is beneficial for your actual shoulder health in the long term. So in short, training your muscles through a full range of motion while in a controlled environment is a great thing.
This guy had no problem at all actually generating to this black hold and almost actually overshoots it. Yeah. I would almost maybe recommend genuinely just jumping to the finish hold. Yeah. It's much better. His hand looks really engaged on the black hold, and he overshoots. So I think he should just honestly jump straight to the white hold. Yeah. As far as just practical advice for this one.
Smash.
I first became aware of the channel back when I believe Jason did an entire month of eating only Huel. And so that's when I became aware of this. And so thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be a part of the challenge this time.
That's so embarrassing.